Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to talk to Brian Freeman about the BOURBE Shadow, the latest in the Bourne series, Jason Bourne series. This is number 5 for you. Is that right, Brian?
That is right. Yes, indeed.
Oh, it was a fantastic read. So Brian is an Edgar Award finalist, a New York Times bestseller, and an International Thriller Writers Best Hardback Award winner. So I'm in really esteemed company today. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So at what point in your life did you know you wanted to be a writer? Did you come out born knowing you wanted to be a writer, or was that something you came to later?
You know, I've really never thought of myself as anything else. I can remember sitting in 6th grade class working on my first mystery novel. So yeah, this goes back a long time.
All right, I love it. So I saw May Cobb last night be interviewed, and she talked about how very much she disliked editing. So when you come out with your first draft, is it fairly well edited, or do you have a lot of editing that you have to do?
Wow, that's fascinating because honestly, I absolutely love editing. That's my favorite part of the process. Frankly, I don't remember who it was that said, that I don't particularly like writing, but I love having written. And, for me, having all the words on the page, it's like, oh, great. Now I can just go back in and tweak and rearrange and make sure that everything is absolutely perfect. So for me, if I could take weeks doing nothing but, editing the book and getting it right and obsessing about every sentence, that would be me. So
I love that. I am not like that. I like to be done with it and put it out the door. That might be, why I interview more people than I write about. Because this is easier for me. So do you how do you approach locations in your book?
Yeah, I've used a lot of different locations in various books. I have 11 books in my Jonathan Stride series, which are all set up in the bitter cold of Duluth, Minnesota, and I've set books in San Francisco and down in Florida and Las Vegas, and then obviously the Bourne series, I've got settings, kind of in a lot of different places around the world, because that's kind of a sort of a part of the history of the Bourne series. Usually I in the past I tended to try to visit every place where I would set a book, because I like being able to kind of scout locations like a film director would. COVID made that kind of pretty difficult to do, so I lost a couple of years doing that, and now I'm on a schedule with Putnam where I'm actually doing 2 Bourne books a year, and so it's yeah, it's a little hard to say, oh, well, I think I'll take a couple of weeks and just buzz over and check out some locales here. So, but I tend to use places that I have visited, so I have a sense of what their character is like and what they feel like, and I always describe settings as focusing on, I call it the 6 senses of place. I mean, part of it is the physical sensations of being in a location, what you feel and smell and sense and hear around you. But a big part of locations also is beyond that. It's the emotions that a particular setting evokes. It's the memories that a setting brings back. And so I want to be able to bring those alive in the books as well, so that when a reader is reading about a particular chapter, they truly feel as if they've been kind of dropped down in the middle of that scene, and they can really feel it in their gut happening all around them.
I agree with you so much on that. I think if you go to places like New Orleans or Key West or Paris, which figures into this, you already have a feeling of what you will experience there. I mean, Paris has been called the city of love for years and years and years, and I think that's what people believe Paris is. I certainly enjoyed it when I was there.
Yeah.
But you know, I think that that's something that's very interesting, that, you know, it is about the experience and the emotion that goes with it.
Right, right, right. And of course, you know, readers ask about settings, and I say, you know, I like to, you know, set books in places that I really love. And of course, you know, they've read my books and they look at me like, oh boy, what would you say about the places that you don't like?
But, you know, I think, though, that brings up a very valid point. You know, we might both love Paris, but we also understand that, for lack of a better way to put it, there's good and bad, or good and evil in Paris that exists in the entire world.
Sure,
so no matter how much you love something, I mean, I'm sure all of your books about Duluth, Minnesota are a love story to Minnesota, right?
Yeah. I used to get a lot of complaints from Duluth readers. You know, how come I didn't write more, you know, Duluth books that were set in the summer? And I would say, well, you know, that 2 weeks doesn't really give me a lot of room to work with.
That's right. You'll only be swatting mosquitoes if it's a summer book. So what is it? So if you're doing 2 Bourne books a year, what's a good writing day look like for you? Is it about word count, or the number of hours you put into it, or both?
Yeah. You know, I mean, it's funny because I'm this year I'm writing 3 books. I've got you know 2 Bourne books, and I'm wrapping up a standalone for mystery for Blackstone right now. In my first probably 10 years in the business, I was writing a book a year, and I look back on that now and I think, oh my God, that sounds like a vacation, you know. You know, fortunately, you know, I've now been doing this long enough that I have a sense of what it takes for me to generate, you know, a book, and what kind of deadlines I need to set for myself. I think about daily deadlines. I think about, you know, weekly goals, and I think about monthly goals, recognizing that, you know, the early part of the book inevitably is a slower process than later in the book. I mean, earlier in the book, you're getting your hands around the plot and the characters, you're establishing new characters. And once you're kind of in the midst of all that, you've got all that done, then the rest of the book tends to go a little bit faster. So you know, it tends to kind of have a give and take as you're going through it. And inevitably, you know, people will ask about writer's block. And I don't think in terms of writer's block. I think in terms of, you know, every now and then you're going to have a bad chapter day where things just aren't coming together. It's just the words, you're swimming through jello. It's just not there. And of course you get all neurotic and frustrated about that. And then it's like, well, okay, you know, the next day, all right, suddenly everything kind of seems clear and it all comes together. But inevitably it means your goals have to be, you know, sort of a little bit flexible. And if you don't get a little done on one day, well, you know what, you're probably going to make it up in the next couple of days or the next week. And that's how it kind of all comes together in the end.
Well, and at this point, you know Jason's voice and you know Jason's movements. And so you're at that place where if you have a day that's a little bad, you know he's going to talk to you, for lack of a better way to put it. There will be a day where he will clearly say to you, I'm sure as a writer, this is where we're going. And, you know, of course, that's the writer's imagination talking to you.
Well, sure, you know, and when in doubt, you know, you just kill someone. So, yeah.
You know, so I make little notes and stuff before I talk to people, because I will not be floundering trying to remember your name. So, but when there was a phrase in the Bourne Shadow that one of the assassins says, it's hard to kill in cold blood. And I think for me, that was, it wasn't necessarily an eye opener, but it was certainly the cherry on the top of the sundae, because that is the difference with Jason. Jason he is trained, but he has a very big heart, which I'm assuming that must make it fun for you. I mean, you get to torture him, but at the same time, you know where his value is as far as a human being.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, honestly, that makes Bourne such an interesting, complex character. And I think one of the reasons that he's had such an enduring appeal for readers for now, you know, 40 plus years, it is that he isn't just this superhero. He isn't just this, you know, cold-blooded killer. I mean, and it's not like he is the same hero that simply, at least for me, I don't drop him down into, you know, a book and expect he's going to be the same character and I'm just putting new action around him. I want Bourne as a character grow and evolve and change based on what's happening to him in the books and the relationship that he's building. You know, I mean, this is someone who, on a very dramatic level, is struggling with some basic questions of identity and who he is and what his values are and what makes him a moral man and what makes him an immoral man, and how does he kind of balance all that together. And those are things that then creep into the relationships in his life. I mean, his relationship with Abby Laurent, which has gone through several of the books, that's something that Abby struggles with as well. It's that sort of push me, pull you relationship with Bourne, because on one hand she loves him and senses that he's at heart a good man and not a killer, and yet she also is sort of, you know, sent away and pushed away by the things that he has to do. And so it's finding that balancing act that is that makes Bourne such an interesting person to write about.
And for the reader, it makes it so interesting on the page to read, because we get to dance along with Jason and see the things that, you know, run through his mind, which I think is, as a reader, we don't always see what's going through every character's mind. Sometimes an author will give us their actions, but not necessarily what's going on in their mind. I think that is one of the delicious things about Jason Bourne, is we live in his mind with him, these conflicts. And I'm assuming that makes it much more fun and interesting for you as the author, because you get to do all the fun things you might like to do with the character's mind.
Sure. Yeah. No. And I've always been a thriller writer that really likes to get inside the heads of the characters. I always like to say that I write thrillers that have an emotional core to them. I think that's what really lifts a thriller above just, you know, pure action. You want the reader to be able to truly connect with the characters and experience things with them. That's part of what makes it such a gripping read. So yeah, I think that makes Bourne, you know, a very appealing character to write about, because there is a lot more to him than just sort of the action hero motif. So.
Totally agree. So we've talked for a while now. I think it's time for me to ask you to give the audience an overview of what Bourbe Shadow is about.
Yeah, well, you know, before this man became Jason Bourne, and before he became part of this shadowy organization known as Treadstone, he was a man named David Webb, and he because of his loss of memory, he doesn't really remember anything about that part of his past and who he used to be. So he ends up meeting someone that recognizes him as David Webb and realizes that this person is sort of a link, a conduit into that part of his life. But as he starts to chase down what's going on with this woman, all of the lies and the betrayals and the violence of that forgotten past come roaring back to life.
It's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. And one of the things that I love is, you know, Jason Bourne is sexy, which is a nice thing because people are attracted to him, especially women. And that's a fun thing to read because, you know, while he has a part of his life that he cannot remember at all, he's still in the moment and is still physical. And that's very interesting to read, because I would imagine if I'd lost part of my life, it would be very threatening and very dangerous feeling, yet he still manages to try to reconcile his current life with where he is in the world now.
Right, and of course, for Bourne, it is literally threatening and dangerous with all the secrets coming out of his past. But you know, and that's, I think, a good thing, something that kind of differentiates the Jason Bourne of the books from the Jason Bourne in the Matt Damon movies, is that when you see the movies, which are, I mean, they're terrific. I love the movie versions, but Bourne comes across as sort of more of this laconic loner in the movies, and he doesn't really need or have relationships in his life. He kind of keeps to himself through most of the films. Very different from the way Ludlum created that character, because in the Bourne Identity and then the two other books that Ludlum wrote, really it's the relationship with Marie St. Jacques that defines who Bourne is as a hero. And so in my books, I'm trying to capture that same essence of Bourne, that he's someone that needs a relationship in his life. He wants a relationship in his life. And yet at the same time, the nature of who he is and what he does makes that very difficult and dangerous. So.
Yes, and I think that that's something that you posed really well in the book, is the fact that, you know, because as I'm reading, I'm thinking to myself, well, how could you ever imagine yourself in a relationship knowing, number one, what you do for a living, and number two, because you don't really know what you may or may not have done in the past. Yet I find that hope and optimism in Bourne, in the way you write him, is so very genuine, because I think humans, we need interaction. Whether we're nice or not nice, it doesn't matter. We need interaction. And I love the fact that you've given Jason hope that he can not only find someone, but be in a relationship with someone. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and it's a balancing act, because again, you can't sort of have, you know, a series hero end up sort of happily ever after, because that makes for a fairly dull series if you know there's no problems going on. So you know, and yet at the same time you want him to have that important part of his life at the same time. So it becomes, I think, a little bit of a push me pull you throughout the books. I mean, you know, is he alone or is he with someone? But that's what keeps it interesting and dramatic too.
I totally agree. And of all the books I've read, I'm going to say this unequivocally: your ending is so sets up for the next book so magically and so wonderfully. And I'm like, I've read a lot of series books and I enjoy them. So because I like to get to know my character and live with them. But I will tell you that the ending of this is so magically set up for whatever's coming next. I was like, well, all right, now I love that.
And that will be the Bourne Vendetta in January. Only 6 months, and
there
Bourne
you go.
will be back. So
good. Well, I hope you will come back, because I'm looking forward to it.
Happy to do it.
Thank you. So, Brian, do you have a website or a social media you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Folks can find me at my website, which is bfreemanbooks.com. That's all one word, bfreemanbooks.com. They'll find lists of all the books out there and links to buy them. And then they can find me anywhere on social media, Twitter and Instagram, or I suppose it's X and Instagram now. I'm there at bfreemanbooks. And on Facebook, it's facebook.com/bfreemanfans. And I love hearing from readers. I love it when they email me and post on my page and let me know how they like the books. I always learn a lot from hearing about what readers think about different aspects of the book. And it always helps me when I'm thinking about how I do things in the books. I'm always listening to the voice of readers. So I always encourage folks to reach out and talk to me.
I love that. That's really brave of you, Brian. But, you know, we all have an education to acquire. So I do like that.
Well, I did learn early on, though, that there is nothing healthy at all about reading the Amazon reviews.
I totally agree. I totally agree. I know that, oh my gosh, my mind's got. Sue Grafton said at the beginning of one of her books, "Yes, I know I put the street backwards. Do not send me an email. I am the author. I will put the street where I want it." And I did love that, because I do know sometimes authors are inundated with, oh my gosh, the traffic doesn't run west, it runs east.
Oh, so. Yes. Poor Stuart Woods. He for several books, he had to put in his acknowledgments that he knew he had accidentally changed the sex of a baby from one book to the other. And he was basically telling readers in no uncertain terms, don't tell me about this. I know it.
I totally love it. Once again, the book is The Bourne Shadow. It's by Brian Freeman. It is absolutely amazing and highly recommended. Thank you for joining me, Brian. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at outwithdan.com, on Twitter at outwithdan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.